Good morning. Good morning. My name is Gunnar Salin. I'm from Newburgh Community College, and I was asked to introduce our speakers here today. We have Professor Amanda Maynard in Brown, and they're both from, and Vivian B, both from Mount St. Mary College, which is beautifully located on the Hudson. Nice website. And Professor Amanda Maynard earned her PhD in developmental psychology with a minor in quantitative studies in 1998 from Bowling Green State University in Ohio. Her research interests are in adolescent development from social cognitive perspective, particularly in the context of employment and health. While working on her master's and doctoral degrees in the 1990s, she researched factors influencing adolescents' pro-social judgments. Professor Maynard also has experience in scale development, including the development of a scale called Adolescents' Intention to Respond to Aggression. She has investigated adolescents' development of work values and behaviors. Her current research includes the evaluation of teaching pedagogies for use with adolescents and the study of adolescents' health-related decision-making. And Vivian Milczarski has an MLS and MBA and is an assistant librarian for collection development at Mount St. Mary College, where she has worked for over 12 years. She has extensive library experience in several types of libraries, including the Small Business Development Center Research Library in Albany, and the Environmental Protection Agency Regional Library in New York City, and the Cornwall Public Library in Cornwall, New York. She has co-authored chapters in Debating Single-Sex Education, Separate and Equal, and the Library Instruction Cookbook, and published articles in the Journal of Electronic Resources Librarianship and college and undergraduate libraries. Her interests are in adolescent literature, developing innovative ways to teach information literacy and organizational behavior. So we're very curious to hear what you have to say and about your work together.
For that wonderful introduction, and I thank you very much for joining us today. We're very excited and very passionate about sharing the work that we've been doing in information literacy at Mount St. Mary College. And from our introductions, both Vivian and I have an interest in adolescent development, and I think that's one of the places where we share a common theme of getting us ready to think about, our students. They come to us, as late adolescents emerging adulthood from the developmental perspective, and I often try to keep in my mind as I'm teaching them, they're with us for such a short time. They're with us for 4 years. How can I best prepare them for their future graduate study or for employment if that's the road that they're planning to take? And so I try to keep that in mind as I'm designing courses, planning assignments, and thinking about those kind of co-curricular or extracurricular activities that I might encourage them to engage in. And so for me as a faculty member, as I start thinking about my courses in psychology, and I teach a number of courses across our discipline, general psychology with the first-year students, often first and second-year students in our developmental course, and in a research methods course, I'm usually seeing our juniors and early seniors as they're preparing to take their senior capstone. I'm teaching across those developmental areas, and so I try to keep in mind, okay, where are they developmentally, what do they need, how are they doing, and how can I really best prepare them for that next step in their lives. And so for me, I think about the assignments that I create for them. And in this process, I think our educational system, K-12, and maybe, and to some extent also in higher education, we create assignments. We give them these assignments to do. Oftentimes, perhaps on these assignment sheets, and I try to do this, is give them as much guidance as I can, so they know really what I'm looking for. They know what the purpose of the assignment is. They know what resources they should be, referencing this particular project, and I try to give them a rubric. What am I looking for? How will your work be evaluated? So I try to provide them a pretty good amount of structure in this process. But you give them the assignment sheet, and we'll have a question and answer session. What issues do you see with the assignment? Are there things that aren't unclear? What kinds of things do you need? And we'll do that in the classroom. And at that point, then they leave. And they go out into their own environments, and wherever that might be, they're doing their work. And then sometimes I think as teachers, K-12, and perhaps also, again, at higher education, we don't see that again, and we don't see the student necessarily working on this. We only see the end product. Much of the time we're focused on what's the answer. Is the answer correct or not? And at that level, then, we see the final assignment. And sometimes we say, great, they got it, this looks really good. And then other times we say, oh, wow, they're really missing a piece here. Or though the skill instruction, maybe that's missing or something like that. And we're confused by that. And for me as a psychologist, we are always thinking about human behavior, thought, and emotion. What are the factors then that influence this? So when I think about this process and we think about it from a cognitive perspective, we've got a big black box here. We send them out, but we don't know what they do. And if we haven't thought really carefully about the assignments we're creating and their varied skill levels coming into this, we could very well have great variability in the skill sets that they come to us with, their preparation for these kinds of assignments, and that might really play a role in the great variability that we see in this end product. So at some level, I feel like I have a responsibility in this process to look at what they're doing in that black box, what's happening there, and are there ways in which I can change my instruction or my course content to really help them with that process. So I consider that carefully. And I can say, like, from experience, in one of the upper level classes we teach research methods, it's the dreaded course in the major. All the students are like, oh no, not that. And oh no, not Maynard. And so I work a lot with kind of, public relations, this is why you're taking this course, these are the skills you're going to get from it. And I also have to really market to them that these skills are transferable. Because sometimes they think it's Maynard's way, and I say, no, this is what your employers are looking for, this is what your graduate advisors are going to be looking for, this is what you need for lifelong learning. And we heard that this morning in the plenary. We're looking to develop these skills that they can take lifelong. So in that, I try to get out of, when I'm not in the classroom teaching, I get out and I'm walking through the library. I kind of get, involved and see where the students are. And sometimes I'll see a group of my students in the research course working together in the library. So I'll stop and say, hi, how you doing? And at that point, they'll sometimes tell me things, or I get to look over their shoulder a little bit into this black box. And so I'm in the library, I look over my student's shoulder, and what do I see? They're typing the entire research question into the search box. The effect of music on memory. Oh no, they're going to have difficulty finding sources that they need to create this quality product that I'm looking for. Or, Vivian, I know from experience, will say, I've got students coming to the library. They're telling me, I've spent 3 hours at PsycInfo. I don't have any sources. On memory. And we're thinking, oh gosh, what are they doing? And again, that black box is there, and so it's not until you really either try to stop and talk with the student to find out what they're doing, what's your strategy, that we kind of get a window into the kinds of things that they're doing there. And so one of the things we'll be talking about is, how do we actually transform information literacy instruction by looking very intently and deliberately at the black box. And so we'll look at that a little bit today. And the other thing, too, is that I think those observations are meaningful, but they're anecdotal. Those might be just particularly relevant to the students that I teach. Maybe your students are different. They have different needs. They come to you with different backgrounds and different skill sets. And so part of it is kind of, looking into the window of what, the skill sets that they have when they come to you. Now, the other part of this is I'm looking 4 years down the road. What is the employment world looking like? What are graduate advisors looking for? What do I need to prepare my students to be able to do? And so I want to share with you a little bit of research. I have a bit of a quantitative background. I like numbers, but these will be it for today. So one of the things, Hart Research Associates published a couple of reports in 2009 and 2013. Now, these were on behalf of the American Association for Colleges and Universities. So what they did is they were surveying employers, and so their samples in both years had about 300 employers. And what they were asking them is a series of questions, and the ones that I think are pertinent for us for today, we're really looking at various learning outcomes. And they asked these employers, at the collegiate level, do you feel that there needs to be more focus, less focus, or the same amount of focus on these various learning outcomes? And so what I'm going to share with you here in this column here, in the last column, are the 2009 data, the percentages in the first column there, and then in parentheses are the 2013 data. These are the percentage of the employers in the sample suggesting that we should focus more in the collegiate experience on these outcomes. Okay, so we want to, the employers are telling us, you need to focus more on these outcomes. And when you look at these, not a lot of them are knowledge-based. not focusing on the content. You need to focus more on, cognitive psychology, types of memory, neuroscience. They're not telling us that. They're really looking at skills. So at the top of the list, you have the ability to effectively communicate orally and writing, no surprise. And even if you look at the numbers, those are, they're in the 80s. There's a little bit of fluctuation, from the 2009 to the 2013 report, but some of those are roughly stable. Writing's at the top of the list. I think we all see that. And, we're hearing about mobile literacy and all the different types of literacy. As they change their modes of communication to texting or whatever that might be, that could create additional challenges in writing, because now they may not think about the audience that they're writing for. So those kinds of things I think are going to be a continued challenge. I don't think the writing outcome is going to move from the top of that list. But when you look at some of the others, critical thinking and analytical thinking skills, we heard that this morning in the plenary also, is going to be one of those threshold concepts or frames that we really want to be cognizant of. And again, that's going back to that black box. Some of those things are going to inform how they approach these processes. Ability to apply knowledge and skills to real-world settings. That, I think, is really meaningful to our students. And in many ways, I think are meaningful to our parents of our students. I'm in psychology. Whenever I meet with students at a new orientation or an open house or something like that, parents will say, so what do they do with psychology as a major? Are they only going to be waiting tables? Like, what is that going to mean for them? And at which restaurant can they do this? And what I want to share with you is, like, nationally, the American Psychological Association is really having a conversation about this, because not all our students go to graduate school. Many of them are looking for employment opportunities. And so as we think about that, the APA has just released, their new undergraduate major guidelines, they call them 2.0, to keep us on our toes. And, psychology information literacy is part of that. It was in the original document. It's still playing a very central role in our newest document. So for me, it's a natural marriage of information literacy and psychology. And, there's a nice place to be able to do that. So if, if there are faculty in the room and you're thinking about buy-in at your institutions, or administrators in the room thinking about buy-in, I think one of the natural places is to really look at the professional guidelines in your discipline. What are they saying students need? And perhaps then aligning with, your information literacy is a nice natural way to marry those two. Analyzing and solving complex problems, connecting choices and actions to ethical decisions. And again, this resonates with everything we just heard in the plenary. A lot of those things the employers are really looking for us to spend more focus on at the collegiate level. So as we think about this, I think the one, for us today that we're focused on is thinking really about information literacy. And so we see the ability to locate, organize, and evaluate information from multiple perspectives. 68% of that employer sample in 2009 said you need to spend more focus. 2013, it's 72%. So there's still a need for that to happen. The employers are seeing that need. So at that point, on higher education, I say, okay, what's my role? How can I best do this? How am I going to integrate this to give my students the real skill set that they need to be successful in that next step of their lives?
So our approach, we thought this was very appropriate to the reactions you can often get in a traditional information literacy session. Our approach came from the limitations we saw in traditional library instruction. In traditional instruction, a class session will vary in length, so you might not have enough time to adequately cover the topic. You might have 20 minutes. It's fit into the class, kind of wedged in, rather than embedded naturally in the class. The class session may also precede the assignment, so students don't often see the connection with what you're showing them. And by the time they need to do the assignment, they don't remember what you showed them. But it's when you can fit into the class. So, you might come weeks before, and I get those on my evaluations all the time that, this would have been more helpful if we knew what we were doing with our assignment. Often, they're passive demonstrations of the library OPAC or the databases, so students are just watching you. We have limitations on our campus with the number of computer labs, so students will often say, like, if we had hands-on, this would be a lot better. But you have limitations with that. You can't always do that, so you come in, you do the demonstration. The teacher feels it's covered and everybody's happy, but it's not really translating into them applying it. So the lecture-based format, is passive, and it's just not as effective. So the case study approach, which we feel is the way to go, is built into the class around a theme. So it's embedded right into the class. The assignment is clearly known by the students at the time of the instruction, and they're fully aware of it, and the assignment's directly related to what you're showing them. So everything's tied in, and we're always like coming back to why we're doing this and how they're going to need this, so they need to take notes, how we're going to be using this. And perhaps the most important point is that students practice the skill immediately after the demonstration. We started with an experimental class that has a 4-credit component. It's a lab component and a lecture component. So we were able to have plenty of time with the lab component for them to practice what we showed them and do individual and group work. So they're constantly being reinforced with what we're showing them.
So in this process, again, we're looking to try to use this case study approach as perhaps something more engaging than that traditional instruction. I can't tell you, I had a student who was, we're doing this instruction and I could see the phone and there was some texting going on and I thought, oh dear, this will be problematic when you go to do your assignment, and sure enough it was. And so you're trying to, I think, sell the importance of this to them in that process. So for us, we did a lot of kind of back work preparing for these sessions. And so the collaboration piece is so important. Vivian brings a set of expertise, in the skill set. I have a content knowledge expertise, and we're marrying these two together with kind of this marketing for the students. This is why this is important for you. And one of the challenges, I think, for our students in many courses, if you have them doing a research project or something like that, they have to come up with a topic. And our students, at least mine, get very anxious about this. There's this whole world of topics. I'm going to have to choose something. And ultimately, that anxiety sometimes gets in the way of them really showing us what they know. So when I think about this case study approach, one of the things that we like to do is when we're going to do this instruction and we're going to see that it has a series of sessions that are sequential, I'm going to pick a theme, and I want that theme to follow us from each session to session. So the student can kind of see how this process begins and have it flow from one session to the next. So the continuity is deliberately built into that. And so for us, that theme has got to be something that will resonate with students, that will enable them to come up eventually with their own topic ideas related to this theme. So it's got to be broad and flexible to some extent. And hopefully that will make that kind of universe of topic possibilities a little smaller and reduce that anxiety that they might experience in that process. Next, what we do is once we've identified the theme, we're going to select a case topic. And this is sometimes very fun for us. We like to kind of get together and brainstorm, okay, well, what have you seen in the media lately? And, what are you doing in the course? And how we can find the connections there. And that's really the exciting part for us, because oftentimes we have lots of examples and some that we really want to get to, we haven't had time to yet. And then we have to think about, okay, who are these students? Where are they in their development? What topics resonate with them? And that's that meaningfulness component. I think we can get students on board with learning information literacy skills and the content of our courses when we're able to show them why it matters. What's the connector point to the real world for them? And I think that applicability is something that speaks to them, resonates with them. So we try to select those case topics with that kind of idea in mind. It's going to be meaningful for them where they can see how it would work in the real world. Once we have the topic identified, then we move to writing a case narrative. And this is kind of fun as well, because we get to write a little story. And sometimes you might, depending on your course, want that story to reflect a real-world event. Maybe there's been a historical event that's occurred, and you want to build your story around that. So we sometimes will create characters that are involved in this story, and again, they won't reflect on they won't be necessarily names of the actual persons in that historical event, because we want the students to experience this hypothetically, and then maybe give them a little surprise factor later, like, oh yes, this really happened. And then what was the outcome? And that surprise factor also brings them into this process. So as we get that narrative, we will create some characters, dialogue. Students like dialogue. I know anecdotal evidence really always speaks well to my students. And so that dialogue back and forth between characters in that narrative really helps engage them and get them invested in the situation, because then they can imagine themselves as part of that story. And so we kind of build that in. And for faculty here, I know there's always a concern about the content pull. If I do something like skill instruction in my classroom, what content can't I get to? You can build content into the narrative. You can build in elements that you want to include in your course, either at an introductory level, or maybe you've talked about something and you want to go deeper into that. So you don't necessarily have to sacrifice, a lot of content here. You can build it into these cases, and that provides you a unique mechanism to do both. show them the real world applicability, and build in some content there too. And that's kind of a nice feature to that process. So we'll, kind of put these together, with the dialogue and the characters and the content where we see is appropriate there for that level of discussion, and try to make those really engaging for our students. Next part, we locate case materials. And so for us, the materials are going to depend on the type of instruction that we're doing with our students. In some cases, we'll be looking for websites. In other cases, we might be looking for peer-reviewed journal articles. In other cases, we might want them to look at a video. So we have to, kind of look for those case materials. But in this collaborative piece, we come together and look at these as a mechanism for having both psych content and also information literacy. It's got to be the marriage of the two of those. So we do that part collaboratively together. So I don't come to Vivian and say, okay, here, use this. And she doesn't come to me and say, here, use this. We really work together to select them so that it meets the needs on both sides. And that allows us to then talk with our students, from those two perspectives about the same piece of information. They get that perspective taking a little bit. And they have a consistent message, which for students I think is helpful as they're beginning their studies with us. And once we've done that and we have our materials kind of set, if we're doing any type of literature search as part of this process, we really test those database searches in advance. We'll go through and do a number of those. We'll identify which one seems to work the best for the situation that we're in. But we also pay attention to the pitfalls that we experience. So for example, we had a recent case we were working on that was related to open office environments and whether those were viable. And one of the challenges we found in the PsycInfo database is that there isn't an open office term. And so locating those sources is a little bit more challenging. It's going to take a little more sleuthing on your students' part. And they may not know about that. They might get frustrated and kind of give up in that situation. So for us, we didn't show them how that works, but then we were able to say, but here's something that we experienced. And you may experience this as well. And so, be prepared for that. Don't give up, be persistent, and then come find us. We'll help you through that process. So because we've done this collaboratively prior to any IL instruction, and we are able to kind of choreograph that and get that information together, we kind of know it a little bit in advance what the students are going to experience. So when it happens, we're ready to talk with them about it, and we're able to answer their questions in a more, I think, effective manner in that way. I think that's probably an important part of that. So we're going to kind of walk through a little bit of an example. So how does this look in a classroom? So we've talked a little bit about the collaboration process and the design process. And then we're going to walk through kind of concretely what you do in the instructional session so you can kind of see how that case study fits in. So we'll start with the research course, because that's the one, the 4-credit course that Vivian mentioned. And one of the things for our students is I'm preparing them to go to their capstone course. And so they need to be able to do an independent research project. They need to be able to do an independent research paper, and we give them the EPA format, as part of that process. And so again, for them, they know coming into this course that they have the project, and it creates anxiety. What am I going to do for a topic? And as we mentioned before, that anxiety can get in the way of their actual performance in some cases. So I'm always concerned about that, and how do I make that anxiety less so that I can really see their skill development and find out where they are and help move them forward. So the theme idea came about as a way to kind of reduce, again, that universe of possibilities into something that's manageable. So we were finding that theme that's broad enough to encompass different student ideas. And so we chose the theme of decision making to get us started. It's an area within psychology that we study, kind of gets into some of that black box, how do you make decisions and what are the factors that play a role. But it's broad. And so what I'm sharing with you here are some different domains of decision making. Students can then elect to perhaps choose one of those domains as a focus to begin developing a research question for their own project. And so, for example, if I have a student who's interested in marketing, and they want to take their knowledge in psychology and apply it to consumer behavior, they may choose that consumer domain. Then they can look at, well, how do people make choices about, their meals when they go to a restaurant? What factors play a role? Is it really the individual, what I want to eat that drives that decision? Or can the menu play a role and how it's structured? Those kinds of situational events that we might not even consider as part of that process. Or if I have a student who's interested in history or government, those students tend to gravitate towards that political domain, and they look at things like voter preference, and they'll pick up topics like that that align to a domain of interest. So the domain is really enabling the student to identify with a particular area, reduce that universe of possibilities for projects to something that's a little bit more meaningful, and maybe more effectively help them identify their information need. Because they'll come to that question maybe just a little bit sooner, instead of feeling the pressure of kind of not sure what to do, not sure what to do, and the semester's kind of rolling on in time. And so once we have that theme then, we start building in our code, whoops, I went a little bit too far. We build in and start looking at the case study itself. And so I won't give you the whole narrative. If you put the narrative on a slide, it kind of like makes you kind of cross-eyed because there's detail in that. So the general gist of a case study that would be used in this kind of setting, we built one where we had the students were going to take the perspective of an employer that worked at a small retail chain. And this particular retail chain for some months was experiencing levels of theft, high theft, in the organization in that store, but also high levels of employee turnover. So employees were coming into various positions in this retail store and leaving fairly quickly. Now, for this, the manager in the particular store, that creates a number of issues. They're constantly having to, find new applicants, screen those applicants, do new hiring, do new training, and it's very disruptive to that organization. The theft component also not very productive in terms of the retail store online. And so it's clearly a problem here that's coming forth. Now in this particular case, this particular manager at the retail store is contacted by the more senior level manager who has been watching this data and says, there's really a problem. What are you doing to address this? It's ongoing. You've done focus groups with your employees. Nothing seems to be working. We need to have a solution fairly quickly. And what happens in this case is that the students have the story, they read the story, we give them a folder and say, okay, imagine that this senior level manager has handed you this folder. This is the viable solution that they see. And they want to suggest to you that you should in fact consider a graphologist. And this graphologist might help you better screen and select your applicants so that they're perhaps more loyal to this particular organization and that they're better fit to the organization, because maybe the turnover has something to do with fit. Their personality, their skill set is not matching the positions that they're being hired for, so you need a better solution. So the students are really asked to kind of take that perspective in the process and assess that viability. We put a little bit of a time crunch on here. We say the senior level manager wants this in 2 days. So you need to feel the urgency of the situation given the problem that they have. And we can imagine that in the workplace something like this could happen. So they might very well see some kinds of immediate needs. So in the class itself, we built the narrative, kind of the one we just described. In the class sessions itself, we co-teach. So we are always in the room together. So they meet us, and in some cases, my lab course will start on the very first day of the semester, and they haven't had any content yet. And so the case is a great way to start off because they don't need a lot of background. They can work with the narrative, and we'll build on from there in terms of their understanding. So we're in the classroom from the very first day together. They see us together all the time. And I think that level of co-teaching speaks to the importance of the skill, and it also allows them to see that our professional experiences and perspectives often really align in terms of the kinds of suggestions and things that we might make to them. So in this first session, we will introduce the case to them, they'll read the narrative and to familiarize themselves with the actual situation they're thinking about. From there, we ask them to make an individual decision. So the senior level research manager wants to know, are you going to hire a graphologist? Is this the best solution for us to do? And we ask them, I give them a lab sheet. Again, I'm a very kind of concrete person. I kind of make sure they want to take notes so they have durable record of what we're doing in class so that when they are away from class, they can look at that and reflect back on that and use that as reference. So I'll have them say, what's your decision? Would you use it, yes or no? And then give a rationale. And that rationale should pick up on the factors that they see are salient in the case that are actually going to lead them to make that decision. And I want them to write it down. I want them to commit to that decision. Because the next step is I'm going to move them into their groups. And they sit, in my particular classroom, they'll sit at a table together, about 4 students in a group. And once they've committed to their individual decision, now I say, okay, talk to your team. Share your individual perspectives with the team and see if you can come to a group consensus. Okay, what is that going to look like? And so in that process then, I want them to write down their individual because I'm worried that if you have a really vocal leader in that group, that they may kind of hijack that conversation and then we don't really see all of the group members' perspectives reflected. So writing it down, I think, really helps them feel that they have a voice, and even your maybe more introverted or quiet student will feel more comfortable saying something because they have something down that they can work from very early in that semester. And once they finish that, I kind of let them go, because, and again, if this happens at the very early part of the semester, so they're building rapport with each other too, and so I'm happy to see that kind of conversation. And there's usually kind of a point where the conversation level goes down, so you know they've accomplished the task. And at that point, we convene them all together as a group, and we say, okay, we want each of the teams to report out. And so, we'll be up at the board, I'll have like, yes, we're gonna hire a graphologist, no, we're not. And as the teams report out, we record their salient factors. You said yes, what were the factors that really related to that decision? And we kind of record those on the board so that this whole class has a sense of what are the factors that are playing a role in this decision. And you'll hear some very interesting suggestions from different groups. And so it allows people to say, oh, I didn't think of that. And they start to see the value of working with each other, which, again, sometimes students are very much, they don't want to work in teams. And again, if we think about the employer data, they want teamwork. I don't know if we didn't mention that one specifically, but they want to be able to work in teams. So this kind of experience supports that in that process. So we're going to keep that information on record for them on the board so that they can see that as we go forward.
And off. So some of the nuts and bolts about how we actually do this. In the first session, we demonstrate the process of evaluating websites. The websites are chosen using the student's approach. We usually Google something, and we find out what we can come up with. And we're trying to have an eye to enhancing critical thinking. So we're trying to find sites that may be dubious, things that we can really point out with the criteria, and because we want to really prepare to use a particular site. We usually choose websites, I'm going to show that one. We choose websites that are pretty glossy, that look legitimate, but they're based on anecdotal evidence or commentary, so they don't have a lot of research behind them. And we're going to just show you the front page of a website for a company called Ocampo, which provides handwriting analysis for businesses, which we thought was right on target with this case. And it discusses supposedly the science of handwriting analysis. So they sell products, they sell services, but they talk about, yeah, you can it's just a show. Oh, no. Okay. It's just to show the students as we go through the evaluation process whether this holds up. So we do apply all the elements of web evaluation, but we just wanted to give you an example of a couple of things we put in the packet for the students to look at. We don't, I'll explain in the website evaluation part, but we give packets out rather than have them do live analysis of the sites. It cuts down on time as well as prevents the situation where a website will not be stable, will go away, won't be there. So we try to print out the relevant things that they'll need in their case, in their packet. So we provide them with a handout containing some standard criteria that you'd use to evaluate a website. Our handout is actually more detailed, but I didn't think that you needed an explanation of what these evaluation terms meant, so I spared you that. But these are some of the things we ask them to look at, and then we give them within the elements, what kind of things would you look at within authority, what would you look at within currency. And then we ask them to do an overall evaluation of the site. So we encourage that they take very good notes. It's a very extensive worksheet that they can keep and take away, and they have the product with them. So we demonstrate the site, I demonstrate Ocampo, and then we give them a packet which contains a practice site, another site that deals with handwriting analysis, that they have to apply the criteria to and make their own notes in their overall evaluation. So we have quite a bit of discussion about the nuances of evaluating websites and how you have to come up with an overall rating of the website, an overall judgment based on your research need. So we constantly bring it back to the case. Based on looking at this website, can you make a decision that's a good decision to give your employer about whether handwriting analysis is a valid method of hiring employees? Can you stop there? So they always have to keep in mind that if they're going to use a website, it has to really meet their research needs. So we're trying to say, it might be a nice website and it might have a couple of good aspects to it, but overall, does it meet your needs? Can you stop there with your needs? So, okay. So next, we highlight out of that the need that you have to use research and real data, solid data when you're making a decision. Decisions such as this should be made using peer-reviewed sources, not Googling. It's not the equivalent. So we get into a discussion of that. And we're going to show you about 4 or 5 minutes of a YouTube video of a graphology, supposedly expert, giving a handwriting analysis seminar. So we want to show them what that entails. Just to give them a little more information.
This program, we're going to concentrate on dishonesty, how you can look at someone's handwriting and know whether someone lies, cheats, steals, whether they're unstable, all the good kind of stuff like that. Graphology, as you know, is the study of all graphic movement, not just handwriting. It's anything where you leave your imprint, such as drawing, sculpting, doodles, etching in the sand, anything you do like that is graphology. We are the only species on Earth that can write or leave our thoughts behind through written symbol. A lot of people aren't aware of how your graphic movement reveals so much about you. It reveals how you feel, so it reveals your emotions. If you're angry, if you're happy, if you're feeling gentle, if you're feeling aggressive, all these things will show up in your writing. Those are your emotions. It reveals our intelligence because we have to have a brain in order to write. And so our IQs, intelligence quotients, are also revealed in our handwriting. And so is our physiology. So that if we have any substance in the system like alcohol or drugs, it's going to show up in our writing. If we are physically ill, it's going to show up in our writing. So all of this is discernible in the writing. First question is, who's feeling more active, A or B? Can't give me the answer before I do this. Okay. Okay, side view. Okay. Okay. Class, who's feeling more active, A or B? Oh, this was such a weak response. We have to give it something. Ready, set, A. Okay, this is how I want you to respond, okay? I need some energy here. Okay, let's just practice one more time. Who's feeling more active? Yes. Okay, who's feeling more up? But don't give me the answer until I ask you to give it to me. Okay, who's feeling more up? Okay, ready? Who's feeling more up? Now, how do you know that? How can you all got the right answer? Did anybody guess A? Okay. How do you know that? What is it about? It's up. How do our bodies act when we're feeling up? Why do we say feeling up? Why do we say down in the ducts, feeling down, down in the mouth, down in the mouth?
I think you get the idea. So that hopefully sparks a little skepticism in the students and gets them thinking a little bit more like, oh, maybe this is not such a great idea, even though we based everything on the website that looked decent. Because a lot of them do say in the first go-round, yeah, you know, my boss wants this, and it looks like a good idea, might as well try it. And, you know, why don't we just go with this option until we dig a little deeper. So in the second session, we conduct a systematic literature search. We transition from the need for peer-reviewed resources to help showing students how to find them. So we explain that we're going to teach students how to efficiently search PsycInfo, which is the premier database in psychology, and that they can use this skill in other classes. So we're trying to always explicitly bring out that, you know, this has purpose. It's not just something you have to sit through. This is going to help you in other classes. So we refer back to the case to find our research question. Can graphology be used, or should graphology be used validly to hire employees? So we pick out our variables from the case, graphology and hiring, and then we go to PsycInfo and Thesaurus, and we pick out terms that meet those, that equal those variables. So for graphology, we use written language and handwriting, and for hiring, we chose personnel selection and screening. And then from there, we're going to demonstrate a Boolean search. So we provide, this is one of the instruments that we're really into, giving them a durable instrument to take away. they have a literature search log. So we're going to do OR searches for the 2 sets of variables, and then we're going to combine them in a Boolean search, with an AND search on the 3rd step. So we teach them in a step-by-step manner that they have to have both sets of variables, which students will often forget. They'll try to do one search, and then they feel they've covered the whole topic. And they have to have a reasonable number of sources that they find. We try to aim at the end result for about 50 or under. We teach them, this is kind of, you don't want to have 3 million. And you see what you start out with. We show them that when you systematically add limiters, you're going to limit your search, you're going to narrow it down until you get to a good outcome. So along each step, they have to make a decision to either search again, to continue, or review. And so it's very systematic. Then when we get to the combined search, we always add peer-reviewed, and we do a whole discussion of what peer-reviewed literature is. We require that they limit to that. And we also suggest they limit to English, since it is an international database, and students will sometimes come to us with an article that's in Dutch and not know what to do. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't speak Dutch. I can't, translate that for you. So if they get used to limiting in these ways, they can be more efficient with their searches. And we tell them, we've had so many times where we've seen students struggle. You're not doing things efficiently. It's a skill you're going to learn, but look how in the space of a couple of minutes, you efficiently do a search and you get a good result. It's a focused result. It's relevant to what you're doing. So it's something you have to practice, but they have this to refer to, and both Amanda and I require that when they come to us for consultation of any type, they have to have a completed search log to show us something that they did. They can't just come and say, I found nothing, I don't know what terms I used. You have to have something to show us that we can figure out, oh, well, you didn't combine the terms correctly, or maybe it's the terms you chose, or there's different things that might have gone wrong, or you only did one set of variables. That's only half of the question. You didn't get both elements of the question. So this, I find, is a really good tool that Amanda uses consistently. It makes the research consultations much more focused, and you can really pinpoint the problems. We teach them about keeping their search history and using the EBSCO folder so they can see what they've done step by step. And it is a very step-by-step process. And then we discuss other limiters depending on their searches. They can limit by gender or human versus animal subject or age groups, which are very specific. So this is a very good instrument that they take away with them.
And I think one of the things, like the 2 handouts, we try to be very cognizant that they need the handouts to use as reference. And we heard this morning about metacognition, and that's one of the things, like in my field, we're very cognizant of that. We try to teach students how to think and review their own work. And for us, having that handout for the website evaluation and having this gets the student to look back at what they did instead of saying, well, I was in the database for 2 weeks, I don't have anything, well, what did you do? I don't know. I'm so frustrated I don't remember. But at this point, if they have something that they can bring to us, we now have the opportunity to have a more productive conversation. And we get them on the road faster, and it reduces that frustration and anxiety that they might have much sooner. And so it's been, I think, fairly successful. And if Vivian's in her office with a student working on this, and she's got a question, she'll phone me. I'll say, well, what are you looking at? And we can share those, and it really helps the students see, yes, there's a consistent message that I'm getting. And they feel more comfortable with that process. And so in our 3rd session that we do together, we kind of bring these pieces together. So in our 3rd session, we'll look at critical analysis and synthesis. So from the literature search that Vivian just showed you in a demonstration, we'll pick 2 or 3 articles that I'm going to have the students read in advance of this next session. And I'll choose those carefully, because I don't want ones with a lot of complicated statistics that are going to confuse or frustrate or provide anxiety for my students. But I want ones that kind of demonstrate the principles and they relate to the problem and the question of, in this case, graphology is valid for screening employees. And so we'll choose those. And for me, given that it's a research methods course, I'm going to try to choose ones that hit on different methodologies. I might choose a meta-analysis, I might choose a literature review, I might choose an empirical paper, and it gives us that opportunity to talk about the different kinds of sources, and so we can bring that in as we look at those different papers. We then, again, they're supposed to read it before they come in. We will do a discussion, question and answer about elements of the articles that they need to understand or maybe they were confused about. Because again, I'm a proponent of when I see that writing issue, if they're not clear, I don't know if it's a reading issue or a writing issue. So I try to tackle the reading issue here. by making sure that they understand what they've read in that discussion. We then move to kind of illustrating AP basics, and for me in this particular case, it's, you know, you're going to end up writing, as you'll see, the next step is a summary to the employer, that senior level manager who wants to know, you know, should we be using graphology? You're going to write a summary for that manager. That's a different audience, and I want them to be able to cite their information appropriately. I want them to now see that that decision they're making needs to be based on data. It's data driven, it's based on peer-reviewed research. And I often will have students say to me, but Dr. Maynard, can I go back and change my first decision that I made? And I said, no. You need to keep that as a material record to remind yourself that you didn't always know this, and that this process has really helped you evaluate now your own metacognition, because now they're doing this and they're seeing it, and I think it helps them to remember that they didn't always have that information. So they're going to ultimately kind of write that summary for the employer. So this, you know, kind of ends those 3 sessions of the information literacy instruction, and we've done them, you know, each session's on a different day because we don't want to overload them also with the process. For me then in the course, the next launching point is, okay, now you're ready to identify your own research question for your project. You have all of the tools at your disposal. You have records of how to evaluate websites and how to search the literature for articles, and you've got that information to help you transition out to your own independent application to your question. And so I think that gives them a little bit of a focus and some concrete skills about what to do next in that particular situation.
So I don't want to run out of time here, but one of the things we really love about this method is how it so easily applies to so many disciplines. Possibilities are really, it's an enormous number. For instance, if you want to do a case on climate change, you can do that in natural or social sciences. You can do corporate or public relations cases. That's very, it's a very tried and true method in business. You can also use it in communications classes, humanities, social sciences. There's cases you can build about vaccination decisions or medical marijuana in nursing or social sciences or natural sciences. We did a vaccination decision with the MMR vaccine. That was great. You can do treatment compliance or alternative therapies in social sciences or nursing, cybersecurity cases in IT and business, social sciences, education. And there's always cases on pseudoscience or statistics in the news that students can learn to interpret. You can do that in math, communications, social sciences, natural sciences. So the possibilities are endless, I can say, but no, that's separate. So some of the challenges we just want to make you aware of. Creating that first case can be very time consuming, but it does get easier as you go along. The first summer that we met a couple of times a week, and we were constantly like, well, what do we want to do with the case on, and what outcomes we want to have, and we designed the instruments we were going to give them, and it was a lot more basics. But once we got that framework down, it's much easier. We get together, we just come up with the case now, and it's a matter of finding the materials, and we're done. So it can be a challenge to find the right materials, but that's part of the fun as well. Sometimes you change direction from what you thought you were going to do, but again, that's fine. You do have to carefully plan and choreograph the session so that the focus is on the process. You don't have glitches, you know what's going to happen, what outcomes you're going to have. And it's kind of important to maintain the currency and the novelty of the cases. You don't want to have these cases that you just recycle and students hear about them and they're passed around and there's no surprise to them and it gets boring, it gets stale. You want to kind of, you know, because you want to do things in the news as well. So it's kind of nice to do current things. Some things that we would say are opportunities or positives. It's a very invigorating method. It is engaging for the librarian and the faculty member, not only for the students, hopefully. There's a lot of problem-solving and collaboration from both sides. It leads to much more productive consultations with the students because, as Amanda said earlier, they get consistent messages from us. They know what to expect, and they know what's been covered in class, and we know where the course is going and what the outcomes are. The skills are reinforced of the students both in and out of the classroom because we're in lab sessions. They come to me for consultations. They can come to me for refreshers. And so the students are getting more reinforcement. And finally, it does help emphasize the importance of IL instruction because we're constantly making it explicit that this can be used in your profession, in other courses, in your personal life, to know how to do this, how to think critically, how to find information, how to evaluate it. I don't want to go too fast, but I want to get through this. So, if you want to start this, find a friend in the faculty across the campus. Consider starting with one session. Consider website eval and build it in that way. You should build it in on the syllabus, so it's a dedicated thing. It's not some add-on. You just come in and you do 20 minutes. It should be built in. It should be expected. It's a session of the class. And you should design the instruction so that the process has to be documented, as we showed with the search log. And we feel the best thing is it eliminates the mystery of what happens in that black box, because we see that process. I hate to rush through the whole thing, but we want to leave time for questions. And if you can see us at lunch. You can get in touch with us if you want copies of materials or ideas. We can talk to you all day about this, what we've done. So thank you for your time, and I hope you have questions.
Yeah, sure.
Gave you all the information you need. You don't have anything.
I was just going to say, who initiated this? Because it seems like you guys work really well together and have good rapport with each other, but that's maybe not necessarily the case in other institutions or other environments or even other disciplines within your same institution.
I think it's spurred because Amanda went to NITOP, the National Institute of Teaching of Psychology, and she came back all fired up, and she went to my director. And it was like, I have this new way I'd like to do, I'd like to try, who do I work with, and I was the lucky one. I am the psych liaison, so I'm so glad we got into this. This was 2 summers ago. And it was like, oh my God, It was very time consuming that first summer, but it's been really great. It's been really great. But,
how many sessions are you able to do together during one semester?
In this particular course, we'll do 3 sessions. And some of the, because there's a lab component built in, so it's a natural progression. And some of the other content courses, like my general psychology course or developmental psychology, I'll do 2 sessions. I'll do a website evaluation and I'll do a literature search process with them. So you can tailor it to what the needs are of the course and what the needs are for the student or the outcomes that you have set for that course. So it's nice and flexible that way.
So do you see an increase of faculty coming on board? Because we do the same thing at our institution, but it seems like we're always stuck with the same. Usually the younger faculty that kind of came on board first. I know what you're saying. But do you see the older, ones that have been there a long time, faculty coming on board with the librarians to do this? Because we do this, but it seems like we're always with the same few every semester. It's like getting the other ones to come along.
Yeah,
that's our problem.
There's been enthusiasm with the librarians, but they haven't fitted in yet. A lot of them are just,
I'm talking about the.
but I mean, they have to get on board too to kind of go out there.
Yeah, I know.
But we have approached a natural sciences professor who's now working with one of the librarians to try to. We've met with them a few times to get.
We're doing this in a year.
Get them on
constantly going.
You've got to kind of.
PR, with my faculty to,
You've got to go out and speak it, and approach the right people, and then.
Have you seen an increase though?
I think we're at the starting process of kind of reaching out to other faculty. I think the one thing I would say though is that, for me, if you're looking at AAC and U guidelines and they're talking about not so much focus on the content, focus on the skills, and then I look at my professional organization and they're saying the same thing, and then we have ACRL saying the same thing, I mean, eventually the messages are pretty consistent. And so I would say as you're reaching out to other faculty, maybe before you approach them, does their professional organization have a document that talks about outcomes for their major? And if it does, kind of look and see if there's some IL in there. If there is, then maybe that's a nice opener. Say, oh, have you been talking about this for your major? I see that's really important for you, and maybe we can kind of connect that way. And that might be a way to do that a little bit. Yes?
Amanda, you have clearly decided that the trade-off in class time that you're losing is well worth it in terms of the quality of the papers you receive as a result of this instruction. What would you suggest for convincing other faculty members to believe that?
If I'm the right friend to start, right? I'm hoping that I think maybe word of mouth will get around, because at least for us, for faculty, I think one of the things you hear people talk about is the writing. My students don't write well, my students don't write well. Well, one of the things we're looking at is, if it's a process of them getting information, understanding it, and all of that, this can help with that. You might see better papers. Our institution was very supportive of our work initially, and they supported us with a strategic initiatives grant. So we actually had 2 sections of a course, and one course did the case study instruction, the other did the traditional. And we looked at their assignment performance, and we looked at their performance on a standardized measure of IL skill, and we found significant differences in the standardized measure, which shocked me, because I really didn't think we'd actually capture any of that. And so I think as people are doing this, I think the one thing we need to do is to evaluate it. We need to get some data, because sometimes we can bring other faculty on board if we have data to support our finding, our statements that this is really useful and can be helpful. Show them some data. That goes a long way, I think, with a lot of faculty. So thanks.
Thank you.